Das ist gut. It's easy. No, really easier than yesterday, but it's long. It's longer than yesterday. He is mamash simcha. We should just float through it over here. Not chas v'shalom feel. Uplifting, not overwhelming. My favorite part.
Good morning, Chevra.
Exactly. It's not morning, but it's good. Soon, in an hour from now, it will be morning. All right, Yidden, we are going. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, Shabbos, Hilchos, Prakim, Yudches, Chai, Yutes, and Chaf, starting with Perek Yudches. Perek Yudches is the Perek that speaks about the din that in order for a person to violate Hoitzah, it has to be a Kishiur Hamoyel. It has to be some sort of beneficial transference. And as we'll see, every item has a different type of Shiur Hamoyel. That will be the entire topic of today. And at the end, we're going to learn about the dinim of if you were Hoitzi Chatzi Shir, and then you did another Chatzi Shir. When do they combine? When they do not combine. Perek Yudches has Chai, has Koyach halachas, 28 halachas, and we are starting with halacha aleph. Says Rambam, Hamoitzi dove mireshus hayachal mireshus harabim, mireshus harabim mireshus hayachal. Einoi chayiv ad sheyoitzi mimenu. These are the words we had in the beginning. Shiur shemayil klum, an amount that's beneficial to accomplish something, or klum can mean to accomplish anything. It really means to accomplish something significant. Now, the following will be the minimum amount of this shiur hamayil. As we learned so much until now, if it's something that's going to be edible for human beings, then the minimum amount is groigeres, this dried fig amount, and we already learned that's 1/3 of an egg. And different food items combined one with the other. But what we may not include is not the klippin, not the shells, not the seeds, not the stems, not the chaff. They are not included in the measure. Gewaltig. Halacha beis. Yayin, wine, kedei roiva revius. It's called a quarter of a quarter. Let's just use the word revius. Don't forget that then wine was very concentrated, and many people would put 3/3 into or 3/4 into 1/4. We have in the Gemara different ways of how they would dilute it, but kedei roiva revius. Now, if it's completely congealed, then interestingly, the shir will be a kazayas. Milk of a pure animal, kedei gemia, enough for a gulp. Chalaf temeya, which no one is allowed to drink, or yidden are not allowed to drink, so it cannot be connected to eating, but it's going to be kedei likchoil einachas, the amount of milk that's needed to apply to one eye. People would apply ointment around their eyes, both for beautification purposes, as we'll see in today's Prakim, and then sometimes also for medicinal purposes. In most cases, if it was done for beauty, people would only paint both of their eyes. Here, this was used dafka for medicine. For medicine, people would put it only around one eye. Chalev isha, human milk, beloivin beitza, and the white of an egg, kedei litin b'mishifa, enough to put in a anointment. Shemen, kedei losoch etzba katana shel regel cotton ben yoymen. We're looking for the smallest human limb. So the pinky of the pinky toe, that's the word, of a baby that's 1 day old. And you want to put ointment on it, or you want to smear it with oil, that's the amount. Kal, do, kedei loshav esaki loiden, enough to become a base for the eye ointment. Keloid, the keloid is an eye ointment, kedei loshuv b'mayim, enough to be mixed with water to be applied to one eye. Kama, Mayim, if you want to put the commas over here. So people would have in their homes mortars. It was a common thing that they had. And the amount that you need to wash the surface of the mortar. If there's a wound, we're probably speaking about some sort of sore, and you want to put something on it, enough to put on top of this type of wound. Dam, mashkin, and that means even sewage water. Anything that is liquidy enough that it gets poured out, that's the minimum amount. Straw and grain, enough to fill a cow's mouthful. Having the kidneys, straw and beans, to fill up a camel. The mouth of a camel is larger than the mouth of a cow. So that's a leniency. In other words, you have to take out more for you to be chayv. Here we're beginning how kavana will make a difference. So if you are doing it, the malis p pada, you're going to feed the straw and the beans to then it's only going to be then it's going to be that amount because you're giving it to a cow, even less. Normally cows don't enjoy eating it. That's called achila alidei adchak. Since it's shema achila, so we can use that chamer smaller amount because that's your kavanah. Amir are straw from the ears of grain, kimalei plitale, which is even a smaller shear. The amount used to fill up the mouth of a lamb. Asavim, grass, kimalei pigadi, to fill up the mouth of a young goat. Ale shumba ale psalim, leaves of garlic, right? Leaves of onions. So therefore they're fit for human consumption. But if they are dried, then because you would fill it to a gedi. When you have two different types, each one has a different shear, they only combine lakula. That means you will need to have whichever one is the larger amount, that will be the shear that you'll have to hit. So you don't combine them lachomer, which means the smaller amount. It starts from the kal shebehem ketzad. For example, hoitzi teven and one kidneys. Im yesh b'shneim kimloi pi param. Then you're going to be pater. Kimloi pi gamo, which is the larger amount. Only if it amounts to the larger, then you're going to be chay. Le'inyan Shabbos. Okay. Now we're going to learn more details on lavashol beitza. Halacha dalet. Hamoitzi eitz. Person is transferring wood. So whenever we speak about it, it has to be enough to fuel the preparation of an egg. Now, what are we talking about? Are we speaking about a hard-boiled egg? Are we speaking about a sunny side up? These details are important because when you open up the egg, then you need less fuel since the egg is spread out for it to be ready. It's terufa when it's beaten with oil and it's put on a pot, which demands even less amount of fuel versus leaving it in the egg proper, leaving it in the shell. When a person transfers reeds, so if the kavan is to make a kulmas, to make a pen, it has to be long enough to reach the tip of your fingers. We all know that, the pencil, when you're making the pencil smaller. So I don't need to have any of it protruding my fingers. But I have to be able to put it where we hold the pen, and it should be long enough to touch the finger area of my fingers. But if it's thick or crushed, which means it's not fit to be used as a pen, then you go back, it's a kana. What are you going to use it for? For fuel. That's lavashal beitza, as we described the details above. Halacha 5. If you're taking out tavlin, you're taking out spices. Kedei tavel beitza. And we combine one spice with the other. Let's go. Pilpul, even the smallest amount. Itron, which is some sort of flammable, pine sap. Kolshu, reyach toiv, or maybe reyach toiv, anything that gives a good smell, kolshu. Reyach ra, that we know for sure, kolshu. That moves people. It tracks or moves. Minip samim, kolshehe. Argaman, which is a very fine purple wool or dye, the dye, kolshu. Psula saveret, the rosebuds, achas, one of them. Mini matches akashim. Pieces of utensils that are made out of hard metals like the choshes or barzel, also kol sheheg. As long as that item has a certain purpose, shir hamoyel, and in these cases, even the smallest amount has some purpose. May offer mizbeach, may abne mizbeach, may mechek aksvarim. These are articles that have kedusha, that have to be goynes them. Mechek mit pechoisechem, So you have a mantle, and all of them are tashmisha kedusha. Since you're mechayev to be goinus them, that means they're chashuv. You can't say it's that little, I can throw it away. And therefore, if you carry even kol shein, gacheles, a kol, even the smallest amount. But hamaitzi shall have es. We had in the Gemara, how is that shayach? But you can carry out just the flame. A flame has no mamashes, and therefore you completely potter. Halacha vav hamaitzi zaroiniginos, seeds of garden plants which are not edible to people. There, the shear is even less than a gregeres. So what is that shear? So he goes to the case by case by case. If it's mizara kishoyim, then shnayim. Mizara hadiloyim, shnayim. Mizara pol mitzni, shnayim. Hamaitzi subin. Subin is coarse, bran. You have to take a picture of your restful face over here. Then kedelit and alpi kushal soifris. I've already explained this. When they would pour melted gold in this crucible and this keli, and they would pour it out, they didn't want for the mouth of this keli to be very broad. You're pouring liquid gold, so they would put a ring around it that would make the opening smaller. So that's the amount of subin that was needed to put it on the mouth of this type of gold refiner keli. I might say mursan is fine bran. So im lachila shir kegeregeres. If it's labehema, we already had that before kishir malay prigdi, which is, by the way, a small amount compared to the pi pata or the pi gamo. If it's litzvia, if you are carrying it because you're going to make this into some sort of pain, then kedei litzboya beged cotton. Love veizrodin v'hacharuvim. Right, the buds of shrubs and carobs. So it depends. If they're not sweetened yet, which means they're edible, then tikregeres. So no, it's not going to be consumed by human beings. For animals, then it's going to become like tigdi. Any foods that are pickled, then it doesn't make a difference whether they're sweet or not, because even if they're currently sweetened and therefore you can't eat it, or the opposite, they're so bitter you can't eat it. Since you will still pickle them, and then no matter how they are now, they will become edible. So it's always considered human consumption food, and the shit is going to get. Halacha 7. If you transfer seeds. So again, if you plan to eat the seeds, 5. Interesting. Not gregeres. A din of seeds. If you use them as fuel, we already had that, which is lavashal beitz. Can you imagine when they would do math, or sometimes when they would make exchanges? So they would use every seed as a representation of a golden coin, just a halt cup. I'm selling you this, I owe you this, you owe me that. And then at the end, you would have to, like monopoly money, then at the end, you would have to replace these seeds. If you're doing it for that, shtayim. Im lezriya, shtayim. Hamoitzi eizoiv, hisap. So if la oicholim, kigregeres. If la be'emek molim tigdi. If la eitzim, kshir hazoy, but what you need, if la hazoyo, you're doing it because you want to put this in the afar mechatos, for example, then kishir hazah. That we'll learn in Hilchas Paradum exactly how much that is. Halacha ches. This is also good. Hamoitzi klipe agoizim uklipe remainim, nutshells, pomegranate shells, or istis, or pua, or any other item that will be used to make paint, to make dye. So then kedelos v'megel cotton. Here the Rambam defines what's the beged cotton, what's a small garment. Kasavacha shemanichim habanis al reshem. Certain hairnets that young girls would place on their heads, that will be the beged cotton. Now we're going to go into detergents. That was interestingly a detergent, as we'll have many times in different halachas, which that's 40 days old or more. So it's very acidy. Oy nesed, Alexandria, oy boides, kimunya, ba'ashlag, and any other material that's used as a detergent. If the herbs are already soaking, then when people would weave, they would make dye, they would make samples. You understand? So I'm a weaver and I'm trying to convince you, let me become your tailor and make for you a garment, and you can have it in this and this and that color. You have these. So today everything is computerized. Then they would actually need a dye to show them you want it on this color, on that color. So the amount needed to color such a sample. Halacha test. If the ink was on the pen, now 1 second. What about the kulmas itself? I'll tell you. We just learned above that the kulmas, the kana, has to have a minimum height. Could be that the kulmas itself, maybe, it's a side of the kulmas just for the ink. So since ink is for writing and the chiyuv of writing for Hilchos Shabbos is 2 oisius, the ink needed to 2 oisius. Guys, how is that possible? Because we learned that Rambam already explained that they would make ink into little dried leaves. So you can carry like a leaf just of ink. Or if it is in the kesses, right? That's kesses soifer. The kesses is the inkwell. So then, now the kesses, maybe the kulmos and the kesses, since they are now in service of the ink, so the only shear necessary is the shear of the ink, and the keli will have that soon, is bottled to it. So you're not chai for the keli, so the ikir has to have the right shear. I think that's the shot of it. Enough that you can take from it and put it on the kulmas. Means the ink will has to have more than that, because some of the ink gets stuck in the ink. You combine them, you're carrying both. So there's a suffix in the Gemara, and the Rambam says there is a suffix, which means don't do it, but you're not going to be chayiv a punishment. You can be chayiv chatas. You're chayiv. Why? Because kesivasan zuhi yanachasan. In other words, what are you chayiv for? You're chayiv for hitzah, and the point is, there's no hanacha, because once it dries, it's no longer ink. But while you wrote it, then it was ink, and then you put it down. So you were chayiv to be moitzi the ink, even though you didn't make a real, what you think to be a hanacha. The writing is the hanacha. That's something else. And here you'll be chayiv for ksiva, 100%. And then you're potter. Because when we're going to learn about combinations, and we will have today more dinim in this perek about chatzi shir, when will you be chayiv if you did chatzi shir and then another chatzi shir if they were both together? Since once the ink dries, it's not called ink anymore. In this case, because it's dry, so the chatzi shir does not combine anymore. You don't have ink and ink. You have ink in a letter, not ink and ink. So we mentioned before that people would paint their eyes either for beauty or for healing. In both cases, because the given was people would beautify themselves by only painting one eye blue. But if you are in a place that no one does that for beauty, if you paint your eyes, if you put in makeup, you put it on both eyes. And if you're carrying that koichal in order, Zephis v'gofris. Now this is a bit hard. We're going to make a hole. So he writes, if whoever's learning the Chayenu, he quotes over here from Rashi Shabbos daf Ayin Ches, that they would have little vials in which they would put mercury, and then they would cover it, and they would use Zephes or Gofris to cover that vial. And if they would want to remove the mercury, they wouldn't remove the whole seal. They would make a hole in the Zephes to make sure that only a drop goes out. That's the pshat of it. No, it's really if this is the correct pshat. There's many different opinions. It's enough to cover the vial of mercury. How much would you use to cover it? Enough that there's enough substance that you can still make a little perforation in it, and there'll remain something else. Shaiva wax, kedelit in alpi neck of cotton. In order for you to cover a small hole, that's even smaller, because here, you understand, you don't need that. You should be able to make a hole through it. Just covering a neck of cotton is something that Shaiva was used for. Devek, any type of a glue, kedelit in beroish hashav sheves. So they would have boards that would catch birds. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to really. It's like a, you're not going to get the bird. The bird is coming to you. When they would go on your board, they would be stuck on the board. I'm saying like a spider's web. That's what I was meaning. That's the way you would chop it. The birds are too quick to catch it, and they would put glue on it. Enough glue to put on this bird catching board. Revolve fat. It's enough for you to grease a space in the size of a cellar. And that was something because whenever you would don't forget, they would put things in the walls of the oven. And you did not want it to get stuck onto the oven. So a cookie in the size of a sella, enough to put the grease underneath it. Halacha Yud Aleph, Hamoitzi Adama, taking out the Adama. Here it's interesting. Adama he teaches as red clay, because that was used to make a seal for a letter. Tit, clay, lasis, pikur, any type of crucible, not even for gold. So they didn't care what material, but they always would make the opening smaller by putting a rim around it. That's the pikur. Zevel oichoil dak. So if you have manure or fine sand, kedei l'sabel, what's the word over here? Kedesha, I don't have it, it's erased in order for you to fertilize a leek. Choil gas, if it's coarse sand, kedei la'alevim eloi kaf shel sayodin, in order for you to mix it. So they would put, there's a certain shovel used in construction called this kaf, and they would put in there lime, and they would put in it coarse sand in order for construction purposes. So however much was needed to fill up that shovel. Charsis, that's already firm clay. Say you're here, human hair, or maybe any hair. Here, again, this was another option that was used to make these rings around these crucibles used by goldsmiths. Sid, lime, and that we remember in the Gemara. So they would put lime on their bodies. If you lime up your whole body at once, you can mamish die from it. But they would do it either to make their themselves look redder. Understand? What is that called today? Today there's a makeup for that. They would put lime and they would rip up the lime. Or they would put it on, somehow would make their skin look whiter, either to make you look red, whatever is beauty. They convince you that's what this does. A small finger. Afar va'efer, dust or ash, to do the mitzvah. Tzroid even, a pebble, enough that if you throw it at an animal, the animal is going to feel. And how much is that? For who? Mishkal asar azuzim. Cheres, a shard, kedei lekabel by the V is. Halacha Yud Beis, if you're transferring a rope, the rope has to be long enough to make a handle for any type of container. Get me a reed, is to lie to make a hook in order to hang these smaller utensils, the sifter or the sieve, hoots and palm leaves, to make a handle for an Egyptian basket. Sieve, palm basket, it should be used as a stopper for a small pitcher of wine. Muchin, unprocessed wool, to make a little ball. They would play with it, the size of a nut. Etzem, a bone. Bones were used to make spoons. Abade. Chuches glass. In order for you to be able to sharpen a needle. So the weavers would have needles. You would want to sharpen it. For that, you would need to have glass. Glass is even sharper. So that it can be a very small piece of glass. Enough for which you can be machshir that keli of the weaver. You want to sharpen it in order for him then to be able to use it to cut two threads at once. Specific strands that hairs are coming from the tail of a horse or for a cow. Two, you're chayiv. If in the chazer they have somewhere on their shidra, they have very hard hairs. Ooh, that even one. It's more chashuv. Nitzrei dekel, fibers from a palm date. So you have under the bark, you have mamish string-like items that go around the tree. Two of them, shtayim. Date palm, thank you. Big mistake. The bark of date branches. Only one. Mitzemer geffen, in other words, enough to make one strand. Mitzemer geffen, the cotton, silk, camel's wool, rabbit's wool, wool from an animal of the sea. Any other fiber that can be spun, it's in order to spin any type of thread. And here we're giving a shear to the thread, which should have arba tfachim. If you're taking out a cloth, right, min habeged, or min hasak, or min ha'od, in other words, a patch of it, a little piece of it. So the shear, what's the smallest beged that has a din of a beged, a woven patch? So by a beged, it's shloi shal, shloi shal. Rambam is not saying tfachim because he expects for us to remember, guys. Remember, that's the klal. Just an ayin, arba amas. Just an ayin. If there's a hey at the end, it's always tfachim. Easy simon to remember. That's 3 tfachim. That's very little. Even only 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim.
For
3 fingers.
people,
So 3 fingers is semed upishtim. That's 3 etzba'os.
right.
And here, but I'm just saying here we're saying, but that's here he's saying any beged from any material. Shloisha, if it's woven together, shloisha means tvachim. That's the rule. A sack 4 by 4 tvachim and oil is chamisha al chamisha leather. Halacha yudal. Hamitzi oil shloin sabit klal. If you have like a hide, but it was not processed, it's not leather. If it's still soft, so people would use it. They would have weights, and it's very important halachically and ethically to make sure that your weight weighs as much as you say it does, like the weight stones that would be on the other side of that balance. So they would always wrap it in something so it shouldn't get rubbed out, even over many years. So they would wrap it in anything, even if you would have a piece of animal's hide that was b'chlal not processed, they would still use it to wrap this mishkailas katana, which weighs a shekel or more. Even shekel, she's not less, but at least a shekel. If you already began to process the hide, one step was you would salt it, but then people, since some people would use it to write a kameya, big enough to write a kameya. Also another level in the processing of the hide, then already people would write a get. But nigmar ibudai, so now it has a din of oir. What did we just learn at the end of Halacha Yud Gimel? Oir, 5 by 5 tfachim. Halacha Tezvav. Hamoitzi klaf mu'ubad. And we learned, guys, in Nochas Tefillin, remember that? So you have the Gvil, you have the Klaf, and the Duchsustos. And Klaf is something that Rambam said there to write in a Tefillin, even though we also write Sefer Torah on it. So what's the smallest of the 4 Parshiyos? The Parsha of Shema, Parsha Voschan, and Shema v'Yohavta. So a Klaf, Mu'ubad, can licht all of Parsha Shema, Adu v'Shodach. That's the smallest. And Duchsustos, that was only used for Mezuzah, they licht all of Mezuzah. Halach Niyar. A piece of paper. So if you would pay tax and you would get a receipt, their receipts was they wouldn't write you a whole Megillah, but they would write 2 letters. But the letters that they would write would be dafka big letters. So the paper has to be big enough. It's useful. If I paid my tax and these tax recipients, the people that represented the government, they didn't have the paper, you have to bring the paper. They just write it or they stamp it or they seal it. Something that's big enough to be mekabel. If you transfer an actual officer's receipt, you're chayiv. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is that maybe it's not needed anymore. It's always needed. Even though you already used it, you can't say now you don't need it anymore. No, he might come after you tomorrow and say, yesterday you didn't pay tax. You always save them as a raya. So it's significant. If you already paid a document, so I owed money. If I owed you money, you had the document against me. When I paid you, better than a receipt, I took back my document. Or if it's a paper that's already erased, people would use it as a cover for a bottle. Indeed. So now, people, what's the smallest bottle? A bottle of perfume. Even that a little amount of it is still chashuv. It's shir hamoya. It's smaller. It can't even cover a perfume bottle. But there is a blank space that could be used in order to give it to the moiches to write on it my receipt, chayev, which is even smaller. Halacha tezvay. Now it's carrying animals. Now, guys, remember the rule: chay noisas atzmai midoiraisa, not even midrabanan. Chay noisas atzmai, and therefore, when you carry a living human being, in most cases, you're not chayv chatos. Part of also is only by a human being, because they help you balance them. An animal, when you pick up, actually, when he's alive, he doesn't want to be carried, especially if he's not used to it. He makes himself heavier. So the Rambam says, Chai noisas atzmai does not apply to animals. And by human beings, we use the concept of Chai noisas atzmai, but that's only by a mensch. But by a behema, you're chayev. Aval adam, that's alive. Einoi masoi. Guys, Einoi masoi, the Rambam is not saying over here that it's mutter. Einoi masoi, guys, only means you're not chayiv chatos. However, not always. If the person is bound, or if the person is very ill, then when you take him out, you're chayiv. Now, since, let's put in between the lines, Chai noisas atzma is only to take it down from a doiraisa, but it's also midrabanan. Once a child who cannot even walk on his own, but if he's being held, he can move. Basically, you have a little kinderlach in that stage. They hold on, they can already walk. Then it's mutar lachatchila. That's not called carrying at all. But that means that they put one foot in front of the other. Even though without them holding onto your fingers, you holding onto the hands, they would fall. That's already b'chlal not called carrying. Even midrabanan, it's mutar legam. Now, hamoitzi tinak chai. That's going to be, guys, the case of isha medada esbena. But around the neck of the tinak, there's a wallet. So now we're going to start learning that in many cases, when one item is tuffled to the other item for the dinay of hoitzah, we're not looking at it. Not so over here. Even because an infant doesn't carry a wallet. You're trying to chaparine since the baby is walking anyways. Let me already put a wallet. That doesn't help. A kiss is not bottled to a tinnik, and you're chayiv mishum a kiss. She'ein a kiss tfeil a tinnik. In contrast, if you are carrying an adult, now guys, I know that carrying a human being is potter, not mutter. Okay, but at least it's not chayiv. So if you picked up an adult that has in his or her pocket a wallet, if you only would have carried the wallet, you would have been chayiv chatos. Since chayno says atzmai, at least the adult, you're not chayiv midoiraisa. We consider the kiss. You guys, you understand? The kiss is bottled to the adult. You're going to be potter. Everything that he has, not only his garments, you're carrying his garment, but the garments are on the adult. The ring is on the adult. However, what happens if there's a garment that's not being worn by the adult, but it's thrown over the shoulder of the adult? That's already different. Then it's not bottled. If you are transferring a live grasshopper, even if it's kolshu, you're chayiv. Maize, but if it's no longer living, so now what will it be used for? For food and kigregeres. Let's say that this is a kosher type of locust. Bein chayiv, bein mesa, kolshu. Why don't we say if it's dead, you should eat the gregeres? Because it was used for medicinal purposes. And when it comes to a refuah, ironically, the smallest amount is helpful. Which means any item that's also used l'refuah, then it goes to a much smaller shear, because that's the potency of medicine. You don't need to eat a gregeres of it. Take a little bit of it, and it's going to be marapi. Hameis, manavela vasheretz. Guys, don't forget that when people transfer a mace, normally they're not transferring because they want the mace over there, but it's only because they don't want the mace to smell over here. That's called the malacha she'en tzricha leguf. But the Rambam l'shitasi, we already began this in Perek Aleph. The Rambam passes like Rabbi Yehuda. Malacha she'en tzricha legufa is chayiv. So what's the minimum amount? Hameis v'nevei l'vasheretz kishir tumasan kach shir etzasan. And they don't share the. They do not have the same shiur. Hameis v'nevei. How much is metame kazayis? Less than that, not. Sheretz, even the amount of adosham. Halach yutes hayisham kazayis mitzumtzam. Now listen to this, and you transported the half a kazayis, you're going to be chayiv. And 1 second, the Rambam just says you're only chayiv if you transferred a kazayis. Why are you chayiv for half? I'll tell you why. Because it's a shir amoyel. How is it a shir amoyel? Because since you had a kazayis, which is matame, when you remove part of it, what you leave over is no longer mitame. Again, it's a malacha she'en tzricha legufa. The moil was in what you left. It doesn't matter, but you're transferring this away affected that. L'choida, it doesn't mean a half a kazayis. L'choida, it means a mashu, l'choida. But why didn't he say a mashu? I don't know. But if you had a kazayis and a half, and you took away a half a kazayis, so you didn't have the share of the kazayis. You only transferred a half a kazayis. What you left is still going to be matame. It's not sheer hamoyel, nishtahen und nishtahin. So therefore, you're going to be potter. Don't forget, guys, potter also. Whenever you carry less than the sheer hamoyel, you're potter. It's not mutter, but you're not chayiv chatas. Allah chachaf. Guys, this goes on all of the above. All of the shiurim that we learned in this whole Perek. It's only kisharoitzi stam. Stam means, like we said, this item, kigregeres. That item, animal food, stam. But if you had a specific intent, abel amoitzi lizera, or little, we just said that anything that's used for medicine, as a rule, medicine doesn't need to have the shade of a gregeres. Even less than it, it's not going to nourish you, but if you need that nutrient, it's going to give you that nutrient. So if you're doing it little, or if you want to use it to show a sample, I want to show you what this food looks like, not to eat it. Wow. Now, halacha chafalef, another klal. If you stored something not for eating, when you stored it, not carry it, when you stored it on Monday, you put it aside because you want to use it for planting, which you need for that, you need a much smaller amount. You put this food aside, or to show it as a sample, not when you carried it on Shabbos. You stored it and you forgot why you stored it. Then you went ahead on Shabbos and you carried it. You heard? So the Rambam says, you still chai b'chol shu. Because since when you stored it in a way that you're machshav a kol shu of it, even though right now you have no intent, you didn't have a different intent, which is different. Machshava can be mevatel machshava. Here you have no new machshava, so the rule is al dasa machshava rishono oitzi. But that's only you. You were the one that stored it. But another person who carried it stam, that's the beginning of halacha chaf. All of the shiurim is stam. If I take out something that's edible, stam, it's to eat. And if it's less than a gregeres, I'm going to be potter. Now, another case. Zajac I took it out, guys. I took it out, ledugma. I took something out because I want to have a sample. And after I transported it, I threw it out. I threw it into the storage room. But in other words, I didn't store it to show it ledugma. I already used it ledugma. I'm a salesman. I already showed you this item. And now I put it in the storeroom. Even though I know exactly which one I showed, since it was already used ledugma, it doesn't forever remain as a dugma. Now it goes back to the din of Eichel. Another rule. These are the two rules. That is items that are so not important that generally people don't store it. And aside of the minig, some people have crazy minhagim. Not only is the minig not to store it, logically, it's not something fit to be stored, like, for example, dam hanida. Then we apply halacha chaf aleph. I'm not going against the stam. I'm going against the norm. Sometimes we say batal machshavtoi, not over here. Chayev u'sha'ar adam, but that's only that person. P'turim aleph, because she'ein chayavim ela alitzois davar akasha latzniya and umatzniyan kamayim. Halacha chav gimel.
It sounds like he's subliminally saying that there are people that are matzniya that and they shouldn't do it.
They're not allowed to do it.
It's not Shabbos. Otherwise, like it's just.
Damnida is a great example. Damnida, people would only store damnida to have the shaila on the mara. Damnida is disgusting, but if it, so the person who I'm have to show to the Rav, mamish, that case, if the aid upon which the damnida is very little, you don't have the 3 tfachim. Are you chayiv? That's the whole thing. It depends for you.
There's the stam shiurim, and then there's like a subjective.
Then there's a subjective, and the Rambam is paskening that even if people dafka don't store it, if I stored it, I'm machshav it. Let's go back to Allah. This is until the end of the Perek. Now that we're 40 minutes into the Perek. Chatzi shir. Chatzi melacha would mean, guys, remember, chatzi melacha means either akira or hanach. That's a different topic. Here I made a akira, I made a hanacha, but I did less than the shir hamoyel. Potter. You're potter from punishment. Now, I want you to know that we will have, I think in Perek Chaf, clearly one place, even though the Rambam uses the word spotted, it means spotted from punishment, but chayiv midoi raisa. That's going to mean Perek Chaf. Question over here, what's the din? Because Chatzi Shir, we have Machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish. I don't remember what the Rambam paskets. Here, it's spotted from punishment. We already had that by the letters. Now we're going to have this regarding everything. And then, in other words, guys, the rule is shnei chatzoin mitztarfen, and therefore you're chayiv. But if you remove the first chatzi, it's no longer there. They have to be together. Then it's as if it got burnt, even though it's ba'olam, it's not here, and you put it. Another case. And you carried it over, not through it, because by throwing it, if you remember, the Rambam has a sheet that has to actually touch the ground. Here, it didn't touch the ground; it's movement, but it's in your hand, and it went over below. There's less than 3 tvachim. Level chayiv, because shahamay ben k'mishanoch al gabi mashu. But if you threw it, guys, this is consistent with the Shittas Rambam. We spoke about when we learned. Now, so another detail. When are you chayiv it? What happens if I put each chatzishir in a different reshus? It depends. Guys, remember this. Let's say, I'll give you an example, guys. I put it in reshus hayachid to my right. Happens to be that going to the left, there's a reshus harabim. Going more to the left, there's another reshus hayachid. I took something made reshus harabim and I put it to the reshus hayachid 1. I took the other chatzishir and I put it to the reshus hayachid 2. But in between them, there's a reshus harabim. The fact that if they would carry something from that to the other, they would be chayiv. Here, it makes a division. It's a different reshus. It's going to be machayiv you. So since it's mafsik, so these two chatzishirim cannot combine. Potter. But if in between them there's only a economist, there's another reshus that's not machayiv you if you carry from one to the other. That is considered reshus achas, because economist midin toid is not a reshus harabim. That's the point. It's not a reshus harabim, and therefore v'chayiv chatzis. Halacha 25. The koydem she'anichoy nitpach. I made a akira. It was a groigeres minus a millimeter, and I'm living in Miami, Nebuch, and everything is humid, and everything gets bloated. So it got big, and now it's the shear. Or the opposite. You're living in a place like LA, it's nice and dry. So when you pick something up, it's fat, it has the sugar, and prior to you putting it down, it got samak, it got small, it shriveled up. In both cases, you're potter. You need to have the akira and the hanacha. We're not done yet. Now, you're going to get us lachila and hanacha. But now, what did we learn above? Stam, you need to have a good get us. If I choose to eat this little four, then even a kosher is chayiv. Which doesn't need a shear, and then I put it down, guys. Chayiv. Shemachshavtoi al eis hanocha. The Rambam is explaining it's not because we're mitzvah of that and the other, because this whole din, what did you have it in mind for, is determined solely your intent b'shas hanocha. So when I put it down, or prior to putting it down, I had in mind retroactively. When I made an akira, I didn't even need them the gregeres. But now I changed my mind. Putter, same reason. You know why I'm putter? Not only because I did not have the share by the hanacha, because I didn't even have an akira. Because, like we just said, because now retroactively, when I picked it up, it was less than I gregeres. I then had a mind lizidia. I nullified it. But if when I picked it up, Liziria, picked it up, Liziria. So far I'm going to be high. Then I changed my mind and I'm eating it. But it also got bloated, which means I feel like here we do say we're learning dafam of Gemara in one halach in 3 seconds. Halacha chav zayin, okay, and you had the shear, guys. A held cup over here, and v'tzomka. When you picked it up, now it's shriveled. You didn't change any intent, but then it got bloated up again. So the din is there's a suffix in the Gemara. In other words, there was a moment in between where it didn't have the shear, but it was not during the akira, not during the hanacha. There is a suffix in nitcha. Zajac kezayis eichalon lebeis atomim. You threw a kezayis of eichalon. Guys, clearly we see over here from the Rambam that a kezayis is smaller than the gregeres. Really, you need to have normally a gregeres. But then we said that when it comes to dinei tuma, if my transporting of food had some sort of tuma effect, it's machshavit. Here, the Rambam holds that for food to be mikabel tuma, mitami metachidik, it also has to have the kibetza. That was the b'machlekes Hashem. L'kula alma, for foods to be metama other things, it has to have the share of a kibetza. Rambam holds even for it to acquire tuma, it has to have a kibetza. So in the house where there was already a mace, there was food less than the size of a kibetza. It's not being a kabel tameh because it doesn't have the minimum share. I take a kazayas, I throw it into a reshus hayachid, and it lands together with that food, making that now a kibetza. So before that, Rambam spoke about if I removed it from a kazayas, I moved half a kazayas. Here it's when it lands, it makes the other item the shir of a kibetza. Harei a suffix in this chayv al kazayas. Because it made something else. I want to tell you the difference. So before, when I removed the half a kazayas, this itself now cannot be matame. I effected a change in this. When I threw, in our case, the kazayas, so why is it moil? Because now with something else, it has a kibetza. There was something else involved. So there's a suffix. Another suffix. It's interesting how the Rambam doesn't write potter. He writes suffix. I wonder what's the nafkamina on halach. It's a suffix doirais. That's the pshat. Not potter midrabanan. That's the pshat of suffix. That's the answer. That you can't do it because it's suffix doirais. But if you did it, you're not going to be punished because maybe you're not chayiv doirais because of the suffix. You may not do it. Potter means that say midraisa you're completely exempt. You're not violating a biblical. Here suffix you're violating a biblical. Final halach yudches hamoitzi pachas v'chashiur. Even if the keli per se is something that would be machayev you for hitzah. We just mentioned this before, right? By the kiss on the tinoi. If I take out food in the keli, if that food is less than the shear, I'm not violating anything. Midoiraisa. Because the keli is tough to the food. And that food, that item, whatever the item is, as we learned in this chapter, ein loy kashir. That we mentioned on a biblical level, and therefore he adds the nuance. He's not bound, because if he's bound, we don't say that. But if he's in a bed, imagine you're schlepping the whole bed, you're going to be potter, because even potter for the bed. And the final case, in the final halacha, something else. Now this, I know it's a big doichek, what I'm going to say. I'm just quoting what the Noisei Kalim say. When we know, Danny, that if I do two acts of the same halachim, I'm only chayv one chatas. That's a machlokes tanoim. This conclusion, even though we paskin that anyways, there is Rabbi Eliezer, I think, is the Tana that holds that if I do two separate acts, even of the same halachim, even behelamachas, I'm chayv two chatos. If that were to be the case, what will be now? And if I'm transporting a perfumer's box, what's the chiddush of a perfumer's box? In my box, I have 100 or 10. I have many little different perfumes. So is that called one act of Eitzah? That's a great picture. Or is that called, right? You go to the duty free, you want to buy your wife a gift. You don't know what perfume she likes. How would you know? She doesn't know. So you buy those boxes that have 8 samples. That's a win. That's a win because one of them, unless none of them are good. Oh,
like they sell those
you're telling me
boxes of tea, like they have
many teas.
flavors.
Very good. So the word is again, this fits even according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's considered one act of transference.
It's one box.
It's one box. It's even if you were to be higher for every different item, but it's one item. And more than that, the Rambam said it's not because the box is mitzvah. We learned the box mitzvah, a box, remember, the basket of chardal, and you moved it out with the Reshus Yachid, the Reshus Harabim. Some chardalach are completely into the Reshus Harabim, but the box is mitzvah. Even if not the box, you held it in your hands. Your hands are not mitzvah. But in your hands, you had 5 vials. You had 5 things. You had 5 different teas. Why? Because Shem Hoitza Echatu. And the kasha is, who cares? Even if it's not. Even if I would go back and forth, if it's Behelam Echad, the answer is, that's the way they say, even Lashitas Rabbi Eliezer, you're also going to be Chayv only one. Chavra, Mazel Tov, L'chaim, moving on to Perek Yutes. Perek Yutes, if you want to know how to get dressed, halachic style is going to be Perek Yutes. It's an amazing Perek. Why? What shot? Okay, we learned about Hoitzah. We learned about the Shiur of Hoitzah. Now there's another topic. There are certain things that will be categorized either as a malbush, it's your dress, your garment, or as a tachshit. A malbut and a tachshit is not called Hoitzah. That's the whole Perek Yutes. So what items are in that category? If it's either a malbush or a tachshit, I can use it. We go out to dress. We have to walk out dressed. I'm not carrying. I'm wearing my garments. I'm dressed. I'm not carrying. Where do we say no? That's already called the Hoitzah. Gewaldig. Perek Yutes, guys. Perek Yutes does 26 halachas. Today we're going from 28, 26. The next one is only 14. But let's go. We have 1 hour left. Let's see how much we can get through. Kol klei hamulchamim. Azay find sechan. Ein yoitzim behem b'Shabbos. Interestingly, stam to point out, we quoted the Rabbi Eliezer at the end of the last Perek. This is a machlikas Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer holds, no, klei mulchama is a tachshit. The Chachamim say, klei mulchama feh, einay ela lignai. Some people, when they wear a weapon, they walk around there feeling who knows what, nebach. And the Chachamim say, no, any weapon in ashanda, it has no tachshit. The chitusu charvoiseyim leitim, fakert. We don't want to have the klei mulchama. Now, even though you're not allowed to lechatchila, Rabbi Eliezer holds you can go. It's a tachshit. The Chachamim, it's not that the Chachamim say it's a gnai and therefore b'di'evet. Lechatchila don't go at all. Lechatchila. But if you went like this, if it's kalim that are like a malbush, he gives examples of armor like a shiryon, a coat of mail. A coat of mail, you're not going to wear a kapata, but it's like a jacket. It's like a kapata. Unlike a sword. There's no malbush like a sword. Or a helmet, right? The koiva. Or you have these magapayim shalagam iron boots. I know that people don't wear iron boots, but if it's a malbush on steroids, then you take a violating of the Rabbanim, guys. Because we pass like the Chachamim, but you're not going to be chayv chat. Spot. But in Yatsa Bekelim, malbush, like a spear, like a sword, like a bow, like a round shield, like a triangular shield, right? A gun. There, then you're chayv chatos. Very good. Halacha base.
You said in Perek Beis,
yes,
that there are times that it's a mitzvah to get your arms and go to war. If there's a sakana.
So what? So that's included in the dinim that you can be mechalel Shabbos with pikuach nefesh, but it's an act of chilul Shabbos.
Yeah.
Okay. No, you don't say that wearing a gun, according to the Rambam, is wearing a malbush. We don't say that, no matter how much you're married to your gun. It's not you. It's not even a garment. It's a weapon. Halacha base. Ein yoitzim b'Sandal hamasumah. This is an unusual din that sometimes we have, a few times, but we have that because of a Maisa Shahaya, even though you can argue it only happened one time, the Chazal made a general takana. We were hiding from the Romans, we were hiding in a cave, we were wearing these types of sandals that had nails fastened to it. I don't know if the picture that Kevin is writing is correct, but there was some sort of nailed shoe. And we thought that the goyim found where we're hiding, and we rushed to the exit, and many people were trampled to death. And the Chazal said that on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, you can never wear a sandal hamasumah, even though you can argue if it can bring you to a sakana, then you never wear it. It didn't say that. They said, Kemaisa Shahaya, that's where you're not allowed to do it. If Shesimru Lechaske, when the nails were there to fasten it, there are other reasons why people put nails on. Sometimes you put nails on because you're going into Veistach. There's too many people around you in 770, so you have those metal tips. It helps for you, not for your neighbor. But if it was done, that was the type of sandals that they wore. And guys, which was Shesimru Lechaske. People would have belts, and on the belt they would have a golden piece or a silver piece. You can do that because that's called the tachshit. Here we go. The whole shu tachshit is mutter. But even when a tachshit is mutter, guys, we're going to have two rabbinic problems with the tachshit. Two, not one. Aleph, certain people would show off what they are wearing to the chavertes, and they might forget and carry it. This was something that women did in the times of Chazal. And in Shulchan Aruch, it says that women already, in the times of the Shulchan Aruch, don't do it anymore. But they would take it off. Number two, if the tachshit is very loose and it might fall, then we are afraid that if it falls, really, you can just pick it up and put it back on. But you will forget and not put it back on and carry it and walk daladamis. So this type of belt, if it's loose, so guys, you already have in this halacha base the exception of a tachshit, but the chashash midrabanan if it's loose. Halacha 3, two types of rings: rings with a signet, rings without a signet. That signet rings are worn by men, and they are in the category of a tachshit. Women generally would not wear it, and they're not called a tachshit. Rings without a chaysam, like a wedding ring, mitachshita isha, in the times of the Chazal and of the Rambam, be'ena mitachshita yoish. And based on that, this is not about cross-dressing, guys. No, this is about carrying on Shabbos. Lefikach isha sheyatzu b'tabash chaysam, or ve'ish that goes out b'tabash ein olav chaysam. Guys, I want to make it very clear. For the men that wear rings today, God forbid you're not chayiv chatos. Many dinim we're going to learn right now in Shulchan Aruch, it says that the minig of what men and women wear changed. The times of the Rambam, very important. They didn't wear it, men, and therefore you're chayiv chatos. Okay. Now we have another. The problem is like this. Even though you don't wear it as a tachshit, but I have another problem. If you never wear it, then you wearing it is like shaloi kedarkoi. So why would you ever be chayiv chatos? Mimanov shach. If you normally wear it, tachshit. You get it? If you never wear it, it's shaloi kedarkoi. No, it's enough kedarkoi. That's the problem. No. Carrying shaloi kedarkoi is not chayiv. Carrying shaloi kedarkoi, anything that I carry, kela achayad, is not called an act. I'm not going to be chayiv chatos. The Rambam is going to say it's enough kedarkoi. Question answers the Rambam. No, it is enough kedarkoi. Why? Because there are times that a man wants for his wife to put away a signet ring. So he's going to say, honey, can you please bring it home? And she doesn't leave it in her palm. She puts it on her finger. It's not her tachshit, but she carries it that way. And you know what she does? She doesn't put it on her pocketbook, but she puts it on her finger. And the same thing in the opposite. Sometimes a woman is going to ask her man not to bring it home. Look at the Rambam. Go fix it. Go fix it. And therefore, again, the man doesn't put it in his pocket. He puts it on his finger when he's walking to the craftsman, when he's walking to the jeweler. So since sometimes they wear it, it's not shaloi kedarka. But on the other hand, it's not your tachshit. If it's not a tachshit and it's not a malbush, then it's an act of carrying. Halacha 4. Lo yisei isha b'tabash she'ein ala chaysam. Af al pi she'im mitachshiteh. Now the Rambam is writing another. Guys, again, what we're writing right now, I'm telling you clear, that in Shulchan Aruch we deal with this. We changed it already. Even the ring, let's say the wedding ring, then, even a ring that's a tachshit, the Rambam writes, midrabanan, don't carry it. Don't wear it. You know why? Because when she's with the Shusarabim, she might meet her friend or chaverta, and she might show it off, and she won't put it back on. She's going to walk with it. And therefore, if she went out, even though she didn't do it, if she were to carry it, she's chayiv chatos. Even if she didn't, she's violating a rabbinic law. Shulchan Aruch Chaim Shin Gimel already says that we don't do this anymore because then women hardly left their homes, so they never met their friends. It was a big chiddush.
Why are rings different than like a sword?
No, that's not. No, it's a tachshit. It's a new thing. It's a new thing.
Fashion.
A sword is not a fashion. Let's go. Let's accept these rules.
Anything that's fashionable, that's external.
Shmuley, let's leave it. This is a tachshit. Just I want to make it clear that tachshitin is something, unless it's loose and it could fall, that chashash we still have. Some people also add this when it comes to gloves, that you might take it off to give a shalom aleichem, and you might end up carrying it. But when it comes to tachshitin, now women won't take it off to show it. They'll show their finger, look at my stone, look at the brooch, but they're not going to remove it. we don't apply these halachas. We don't paskin like the Rambam, but just to be aware of it, because wow, this man Rambam, the Rambam is paskin that woman cannot go out with jewelry at all. Midrabana. But a man could. Something that a man wears as jewelry, like a signet ring, because it's not the darkoi of a man to show it off in public. It doesn't show off his jewelry. I can argue that hey, God today could be tumfaket. You don't know. This is really totally bezman b'mak. These halachas. Halacha 5. Isha sheyotzes b'machat nukuva. Machat nukuva can either be, see, a machat can be like a brooch, but the moment there is an eye in the needle, what are those needles used for? For sewing. That's not jewelry. A woman who goes with machat nukuva, even if it's in her garment, she's chayiv. But a man is not liable. Why not? Because since men don't sew, he's wearing it as a tachshit, with the exception of a tailor. If your profession is to use that as a klei malacha, you understand? This has to do with something that can be used as a tachshit, used for work. It's like in that time, in your time, what gender uses it for what? The ish. He's going to be chayiv. Okay. This for a man is considered a masoy. A man doesn't wear a brooch. And a woman is going to be pater. Guys, why is it not mutter? Because the Rambam passes, like we just mentioned in Halacha Daled, that even jewelry, midrabanan don't wear. You might show it off. And the only reason why it's also is that's why we say the word pater. Zajac klal, guys. It's not a tachshit. And if it's not a malbush, and chayev, easy. These are close. But it's very loose, and therefore it might fall b'mehera. Then we say maybe the or if we are afraid isha b'chlal that goes out with her tachshitin. But even in the times of the Rambam, only common women would show off things. Noble women would not show off things to take it off. So he's saying that's why he's adding this one. Even the Rambam writes, a woman is going with jewelry that it's common for her to remove it to show it. Then it's not chayiv because it's a tachshit, but it's not mutter because she might end up carrying it. Which is how we paskin today for jewelry. And therefore, it gives even by women, which would show off things, but they would not expose their body tznius to show it off. So a bracelet that's based on a part of her body that she always keeps covered. In order to take off that bracelet on her thigh, she has to expose her thigh. Yoitzin b'Shabbos. But guys, that it's not going to fall off. Because you have to make sure not that she'll show it off. That's not darka to show this off. Nor is it possible for it to fall. And now we're going to learn Hilchais jewelry. What women used to wear for jewelry. Halacha vav. So married women have to cover their hair. One option would be to use woolen strands. We have options of using hair of her or of another human being or of animals that we'll get to later. That's already the fancy shekel. This is she's wearing woolen. She may not use even though guys it's kshurin. She's not going to uncover her hair. There's another chashash. If a woman has to go to the mikveh Friday night, so certain strands that she ties to her hair, remember that, is not considered tightly bound to her hair. It does not make a chatzitza. These fibers make a chatzitza if it's tied to her hair, which means when she went to the mikveh, she would have to untie it. While Rabbi chayish, she's not going to properly tie it. We're not even going into how could she tie it, but even if she's going to make a kesher, that's ma'aseh hedya. That's not shel kayom. So it's not a kesher issue, but she might not put it on after she goes to the mikveh, and she'll end up carrying it. Shema tachlitz oisam shas tefillah. Don't forget, she went to the mikveh at the river outside the city at night, and another din. There was a frontlet that women would wear on the forehead, and they would wear also bangles of gold that would hang from the frontlet on her cheeks. If they're not sewn together, which means these are tachshitin, even though she might not take it off to show off, these things used to fall. She can carry it because Shama Yipol. People used to wear a golden crown. Or they used to wear ankle chains. And why would they wear them? That would just also to make sure that they don't take very large strides. All of what we learned over here It's not because she would show them off. Either the woolen sheitlach, because she has to untie it, but she might, prior to putting it back on her hair, she might carry it. And the other ones, it might fall. They would wear necklaces. They would wear nose rings. They would wear small little vials of perfume, either on her arm, which is called a koicheles. None of the things may be worn, nor now we're going into a payah, into a sheitel that's made out of here. Now, guys, some payahs, some sheitlach are great. These were sheitlach for a woman who simply wanted to make her to appear that she has even more hair. She should look like she's a balas seyor harbe. They would wear woolen pads that go around their face. Let's see if Kevin can find that woolen pad. No, the woolen pad that women wear around their faces. Now there's another thing. Sometimes we are afraid that it might fall, or she's going to show it off. Now we're learning another nuance from the tooth. What do you think looks better? You're missing a tooth, or you're having a golden tooth? So if the tooth was made out of silver, that's gavaldik. That was the fancy, because the silver tooth looked like a real tooth. Never then. But a golden tooth or a red tooth was so dissimilar to your other teeth that sometimes a woman would be more comfortable removing the tooth than having such a discolored tooth. So she'll remove it to hide it. She's uncomfortable. The Rebbe held this regarding tichlach, not benegei Shabbos, that sometimes a woman is very comfortable in today's sheitlach, but in a tichel, she's not that comfortable. She might remove it. This is an item that might be removed because it looks very not nice. Why again? Because she's going to be ashamed of it. A silver tooth then was already the best type of dentist you went to, a silver, because silver doesn't blatantly stick out like the gold. Kavan found a very pure something that is for something, I don't know what that is, but very good.
The woolen pad they wear on their head.
The woolen pad they wear around their face. Called Elo Asur Latzis Behem Shema Yiplu V'Taviyeno B'Yada. We added these words. I don't know if you have them over there, because some of what we wrote in Halacha Zayin is because it might fall, and some of it is like we mentioned by the tooth. Tachloitz, she's going to take it off to show it off, or take it off to hide it because she feels very uncomfortable in it. Halacha Ches. Kol Shasr Chacham Latzis Reshus Arabim. What about Asur Latzis B'Yafil V'Chashenim Oreves? Guys, going from my house into my yard, we're going to learn about this, God willing, next week in Hilchos Eruvin. If I did not make an Eruv, is problematic midrabanan. Don't forget over here, the whole not carrying, the whole not wearing these tachshitin is a midrabanan. Sometimes we would say, don't make a double gzeira. Sometimes we would make it. So everything we learned above may not even be taken, even though you're doing an act of Eitzah midrabanan, even if you were to forget and take it off, with two exceptions. The kabul, upeiah shall say on, these two things, a woman would feel like she looks nicer wearing them more than another jewelry. Don't forget, guys, she's not carrying it. It's maybe she's going to remove it. You know what? We don't want her to look unattracted to her husband. So there we were matter for the kabul and for the payah. So they would wear little flasks that would have perfume in it. It's called the tachshit. You know when? If itake is functioning, because there's perfume in it. If there's no perfume in it, then you're chayiv. In other words, it's not ornamental if there's no perfume in it. Halacha 9. Now let's go to add-ons. That's what it's called for the women. No, it's but add-ons mean hair extensions. Thank you. So that they are allowed to wear. 1 second. If she's going to go, a woman is going to go Friday night to the mikvah. She's not going to. No, the hair extensions don't have to be removed. Hair on here don't form such a tight knot that water cannot go in it. And therefore, she won't remove it even if she has to go to the mikveh Friday night. For you to make a gzeira shema tiviyim reshus harabim. And that doesn't make a difference whether she's wearing hair extensions out of her own hair. Clearly here you see about sheitlach. It can be human hair. It can even be your hair. That's a covering. Bein shel behemam. Behem is the synthetic wigs. Yeah. Veloy say it says yaldo. Now what about a elderly woman? However you define that, be very careful. If she is not allowed to wear a old woman cannot wear a black shape. Why? Because since it's such a beautiful ornament, she might show it off to show her friends. Again, you see this, it's a different type of people. Can you imagine? Avol Yalda, a young woman who never couldn't find the shaitel, so she took her bubby shaitel to run outside, not to go with her uncovered, and she's wearing an old shaitel. She's not going to show. She's not going to boast with it. She's not going to show it off. And another din, v'chol shu arig, any woven hair covering may be used. The only reason why you would say it can be used, first of all, it's not. She's not going to show it off. On the other hand, it's tied up to her hair. No, it's not tied up to her hair because a woven garment, even if it's tied to her hair, that was the Mishnah, doesn't create a chatzitza. It's not a hair extension. Very good. It doesn't have a din of a chatzitza. It's not tight. Halacha yud. Yoytze isha b'chutun shavasavara. A woman is allowed to go b'chutun shavasavara. Mipnei she'enu chenekas atzma b'hen enu chaytzitzin. In a necklace. What's the chashash? If the chashash is only about chatzitza, it doesn't make chatzitza. But if it's colored, a colored necklace, it's not going to make a chatzitza, but she might show it to her friends. How great is that? The yoytze isha b'klil shol zav b'roisha, a royal headband. A royal headband may be used. She might take it off to show off. Noble women, like all the women today are royal women. They would never show off. They would never take off the jewelry. It's a common thing. They would point to it. They would want you to notice it, but they wouldn't remove it. So if it's a tachshid that's b'chlal generally only worn by royal women, she'ein yoytze by el isha chashuba, and isha chashuba she'ein darka lachletz laharis. Another thing, the yoytze b'tzitz, she's allowed to go. A woman can go out with her frontlet, and with these bangles of gold if they are tied to her tichel. Because what was the issue we wouldn't be above? It might fall off. If it's not going to fall off, if she has some sort of ear infection, so she put a cotton ball in her ear, as long as it's kashur ba'asna, however you attach, it's not tied. Sandal, you wear a shoe and the shoe is too big. So the solution is put tissues in there, exactly. As long as it's kosher b'sandal. Or with protection, what they call b'mechsher is skin linidasa, and that is afbishena kosher. And vafilu asasole beisiyad, which means it's easy to remove. Doesn't matter. There's no chashash because even if it falls out, she'll never put it back in. She's going to throw it out. Now, women for bad breath, then the solution was you put a pepper grain in your mouth or you put salt in your mouth. Go try that. So if she put it in her mouth, guys, prior to Shabbos, now, if it was already in her mouth Friday afternoon, these were items that would stay in the mouth for many hours. If it's already there, she can keep on going with it. But she should not lechatchila put it on Shabbos. Okay. Which also means that if it already fell out, she should not place it back in. Halacha. Chewing, I don't know. I want to okay, that is this was because they had bad breath. So there's an additional reason why we're not. Minty gum, my experience is only minty chewing gum for the first 30 seconds. And then there's nothing left other than just being a malagator. The yoitzes hanoshim b'kismin shabazneim. They would wear woods in their ears. So when women make the holes in the ears, nebach, right? Today, nebach the men. So you know that if you remove the earring, it's going to close. Then you have to go to another guy with a nail to knock it in again. So even when you're not wearing jewelry for the lechela not to close, they would stick a toothpick. So is that a tachshit? So she's allowed to go with those little. It's not called carrying. They would wear bells around their necks or bells on their garments. Now we're not talking about bells that have knackers. That's another issue. It's called mashmiya kol without knackers. If that is pashut, it makes you look more chashiv. You're walking around with bells, and you are allowed uvaredid haparots. So here it'll go like this. They would have different garments, and they would have to tie them. Today we have buttons. They didn't have buttons then. So we're going to go where you already also mentioned, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, how they would pick up the edge of one end, they would put it on this side, they would have a button, or they would put a nut, they would put a coin, and they would wrap it around, and we're going to start learning about all that. She can even wrap the garment on that button, the yoitza, with one exception, that if she really wants to carry the egos, she wants to carry the nut. So she says, oh, I'll use the nut as the button. We use it as buttons. She can't do that. Ubavad, right? The yoitza, but v'loitanim v'sifroif al ha'egos. K'nei litzir levna akad. T'chein loisifroif al ha'malbei lachatchila. Don't use a coin lachatchila because you're not allowed to be metal to a coin. But if she did it, yoitzaba, because right now, the tiltal of the coin is completely shaloi kedarkoi. The only issue would be hoitzah. It's not called hoitzah because now this item, even though it's not sewed on, they would take something hard, they would put it on their shoulder normally, they would put the edge on it, they would tie it around with the rope, and then it's serving as a button. Halach Yud Gimel. Yoitzah adam by case Shabashinav. When people have toothaches, one solution would be to leave the toothpick in your teeth. Many people from the south here do it as well the whole time. Sandal. Or they would, a man, if the shoe was too big, so they would fill it up, not with tissues. That's for women. They would fill it up with toothpicks. That is allowed. That's not called carrying. The im nafal, but if it falls out, lo yachzer. Likewise, a person, man or a woman, can go out with a wadding, with the sponge over a wound, right? As long as it's not wound around with a proper cord or string. I want to tell you right away in the Lashon in Gemara, little chutalach, chutin is allowed. Something that's there only to keep the bandage on is part of the bandage. But all you need for that is a little string. The moment you're bringing a thicker string, that's called carrying. That's the halachi. Another thing, the yoitze b'klipas hashum, you can go with a garlic peel or the onion peel around the wound. People would do that. That's like a bandage. Or any type of woven garment. People put a garment, right, on a makkah. And more than that, the koishrei matira b'Shabbos. You know why? Number one, whenever you would put this bandage and you would tie it with these materials, it's not a kesher shel kayama, and it's not a ma'aser uman. We learned that. Uba aspeloinis. Now, different type of compresses or plaster or any type of dressing of a wound. All of that is allowed. Ubasela shal gabayat. Ubasela, people would have different type of sores. You know what they would do? They would put a coin on it. It's all of this. I know it's malbush for the fuah, but it's not carrying. Can you imagine? They would go with the locust eggs. The Rambam writes that people who would have weak legs, they would put locust eggs on their thighs. Go try that out, and it makes your legs stronger. Today they would say go do exercise. That was a good solution then. Ubeshein hashul, people would wear a fox tooth. A fox tooth would cure insomnia. It's good for you to know that. So imagine it's not a tachshit. And now there's a whole other topic. Are you allowed to do these practices? You know what the Rambam says? Any medicinal, any medicine of this nature, if it works, a yid is allowed to do. These things work. So you can wear the fox's tooth. Or another din, if a person has high fever, you know how they solved high fever before they had Advil? They would go to a gallows, they hung a person, they would remove a nail from the gallows, and you would wear that nail. Mitamol, you're feeling better. The fever went away. You're allowed to wear that. And any other necklace that you are wearing, guys, that's not called a tachshit, but you're wearing it l'shem refuah. But that's important. And there's two details here. If this is something that the Rambam considered ineffective, and if the goyim did it, then you're not allowed to copy that minhag. And you're carrying. But if it works, it's not called l'seichel b'chukay because it works. And it's not called carrying on Shabbos.
Saying these things work.
The Rambam is saying these things work. Now we're learning. So we're learning style. We're learning today style and medicine. The Sunday guys will make a killing. This the cure for fever. Go hang someone and then take the nail and make them into little stickalach and yeah.
The halachas of Hotzah are not more lax because it's the refuah. right?
Yes, it is. It means it's not carrying. It's called a wound dressing. I like the word in English. Came to me. If it's a wound dressing, it's dress. It's a malbush for you. For me, wearing nothing for you, God forbid, for a person who's ill. So if I put on a cast, it's not a malbush. But the guy that needs a cast, if they're not carrying, for them it's a malbush. Very good. Halacha Yudala. Yoitza Ishab Evan Tekumam. And Evan Tekumam is a certain type of stone that women wear to prevent miscarriage. And you know what worked? Not only the Evan Tekuma, but if they would have any other stone that had the same weight of an Evan Tekuma. It's like a mystical thing. Maybe they had to put the Evan Tekuma on the balance and they balanced it out. That also gave that koyach for them not to have a miscarriage. You take they took Evan Tekuma. I don't know what that Evan was, but you hear how they make clones of it? No, I don't have an Evan Tekuma, but I put it on my balance, and any other stone that I put opposite it, and my kavanah is that the koyach of the Evan Tekuma should go into it. It's imbued with Evan Tekuma power, and a woman can wear it. And the Rambam is saying not only may a pregnant woman wear it, chavra, any woman who is in the age of getting pregnant can also wear it. Because she's saying to herself, I'm wearing it just in case I get pregnant. This will make sure I don't have a miscarriage. The yoitzin, the kameya mumcha, same thing, a kameya, same concept, amulet. It has to be an expert amulet. What makes it expert? No, if it doesn't work, then you're not allowed to wear it. Two things. Either this amulet was worn and it healed, God healed through it 3 people, or it was made by a person who previously had written 3 different amulets. So he has a chazaka that he's a guy who knows how to write amulets. And now he wrote this one, even though this is a brand new amulet. Rabbi Yitzchak Groner of blessed memory showed my wife and I a kameya that Rebbe gave for his wife. Do you know that? And the Rebbe wrote his name on it. The Rebbe wrote his name, mamish like the Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbe's name, Ben Rebbetzin Chano. And that was to be worn by his wife. Amazing. If he showed it to me, he told it to me, that was many, many years ago. That was a big impression. Wow. Because tefillin has a kameya power, which is something that we have to deal with. Because when we make the mitzvahs into, that was the mezuzah. Remember, if a mezuzah, instead of wearing it l'shem mitzvah, you wear it only for protection. That I'm with very sharp words. But Shabbos, you can't wear tefillin mitzvah mitzvah. There's no mitzvah. Maybe it has a koyach of kameya. Halacha tezva. Kol mi sheyesh beraglei makot. You have a wound on your foot. Yoitze besandal yichidi beraglei abriya. You can wear only 1 foot. We don't say it's called carrying. It's normal. But if you don't have on one leg a makah, and you're unilaterally deciding just to wear 1 shoe, lo yetze biyachid. Wearing 1 shoe is called carrying, if there's no reason for it. A child cannot wear a large shoe. It's called carrying, but a small person can wear a large shirt, because a large shirt for a minor becomes like a jalaba, but it does the function. Well, they say it's a woman should not be wearing a loose-fitting sandal, not a brand new sandal which was never worn before. Why? Because she might remove it because it doesn't fit properly. The Rambam says a person with a limb that's missing may not go out with a type of wooden, what's called a prosthetic. They cannot wear that. It didn't. No, this is not nowadays. Nowadays, at mamash, they make for you a whole different type of prosthetic, but the type of kav of wood that they use cannot be used. And on katmin shel eitz, on katmin, if I'm not mistaken, was a person who's missing a hand. Yeah. No, on katmin is a wooden shoe. Machloikas. Either it's a wooden shoe or it's the hand prosthetic. Ein yochel Shabbos, mepnei she'enim medarkem malbush, but ve'im yatsu and all of that, then you're going to be potter. Halacha tezayin yotzim be pikariyoin. A person may go out wearing a tuft or batzipa or some sort of wool wig. These are men. What's it called? There's a name for this. The men wigs, the people that are bald and they think that they're helping them. Toupee. I apologize to all the toupee wearers. It's like, you can wear, they would have either a linen or a woolen. You could, for Bali Chatotim. But you know when you can use it? If it looks real. How did it look real? That it was painted and it was already oil. It was already smeared with oil. Or there was one worn once, because if not, then you'll notice it's a topei. And the moment you notice it's a topei, if he would only know this looks like a topei, then he wouldn't wear it. It's mamash gavalik. Abel imla yosa b'hem ma'aseh. You never wore it before. You didn't put some oil in it. Then la yosa k'ayim Shabbos. Or you never wore it. Then at least midrabanan it's aser. Tzemach teherst halacha yud zayin.
This sheer sha'achas, that mean?
That means if you wore it once, that means you showed. No, it means you showed that you're comfortable with that topei. Halacha yud zayin. Yoitzin basak ha'ava. You can go out wearing a coarse sock. I'm trying to remember under the cap. I'm trying to gedenken. Okay, no. I'm sorry. I take it back. It's there more than me. Okay. Yoitzin basak of. That's only if it's not a topei. I don't know, but the MS. Yoitzin basak avo ubesgois avo biyeria ubachamila b'pnei agshamim. In other words, when it's raining, how coarse of a garment can you argue it's to protect me from the rain? So I'm allowed to wear it. You know what people do in Brazil? You know these big boxes, these cardboard boxes. They make a place for their face and they go in a box. Poor people. So that, there has to be a limit. There has to be a point where we're saying, I don't care that you're wearing it for the rain. You're carrying. So wearing a saka ava, this kois ava, this yiriya, this chamila, right? These woolen blankets, that's okay, but not a box. That's the limit. Even a mat. They would take a mat and they would wrap themselves in the mat because that's already called carrying. Hakarva says a pillow and a blanket. It depends. If they are raken v'daken k'mei begodim, then mutaloy tzin munach mal rosh b'shav zerach malbush. If you're kashim, then they're like a masa in their us. Halacha yudches. Yoitzin bazoygin v'arungim b'begodim. What about bells? Now, guys, we're not speaking about a bell with a clapper. There's no clapper. Is that considered an ornament, or is that considered an add-on that's not needed? You are allowed to go bazugin v'arungim b'begodim. It's considered ornamental. A slave who would have that little seal, they would have a seal to show that he's a slave and to whom he belongs. So if it's made out of clay, he can go. But if it's made out of metal, why? Because there is a fear, it might fall. The good thing about the clay one is that if it falls and it breaks, he's going to leave it. But the metal one, since if it falls, he might carry it, midrabanan, you can't carry it. If you wrap yourself in your talis, and some of it is folded up. So it depends. If you folded it up on your body in a way, not because that's the way you wear it, because you're walking in an area where there's a lot of mud on the floor, so you unusually wrapped it up or rolled it up for it not to get dirty. That's not called wearing. Then it's also midrabanan. But the im keeps him lisnois by him. The way we put on our talis when we daven, we also roll it on our shoulders. But that's the way you wear it. Then it's mutter. Remember that question in yeshiva in the jacket? If your hands are not in the sleeves, certain things, it depends what the derech is. If you have the talis, the way we put it on before we daven, when we look at the strings, it's just folded on your shoulder. That's pure chayav chatos. This type of kerchief, that al ksefai, people wore it that way. Now the truth is that most people, I know in Borsalino, many of the hats, there's that little string. Where did that string come? And then you have on your lapel, you somehow have a little hole that you never opened. So what they used to do is that they had these sudanim, and they would have a string attached to it. They didn't have the lapel, but they would attach it to the finger. There was a gimmick that people had that if the wind blows it off, it shouldn't fly away. So you are allowed to wear the sudat, even though there's no nimak shural is boy. In the times of the Rambam, that was already, it was not used. And the minhag of wearing a sudat was it should cover roishay v'rubai. Roishay v'rubai means not the majority of your body, guys. That's called the talis. Roishay v'rubai means the head and your shoulders, ruba of the shoulders. The also lots of boy. Choisa sabnis ketzara. Now sabnis ketzara was a certain small garment that people wore after they left the bath, because you can't get a wind. So that she'ein rachava. And what's the issue? Now that's the darkoi, even though it's a small begeder. The problem is it might fall off. Then you know what you do is you tie it below your shoulders. I don't know exactly where it was tied, but you make a little one knot. It's not a kesher shel kayama. It's ma'isa hedyet, and therefore it becomes like a belt around your neck. And if it's a belt, you're allowed to go out with a belt. And this thing, you make it into a belt. Many people use when they go to the mikveh with a towel. Because avnait is okay, even though it's covering a very small amount of your body. What many talesos have, I'm not even talking about our talesos that have beautifully melolim hems that are knotted. What happens if they got unknotted? Those little balls are unknotted. So it's stam strands. It's okay. It's still considered part of the beged. And even though they're not nice, they're not adding to the beauty of the talis. So the question is, Taka, why is it allowed? Because they're bottled to the talis. And that's the key. And you are not makbid whether they are on it or not. And guys, don't confuse this with the buttons that people have sewed onto the shirts. That could be more problematic. Because okay, I'm not saying it's awesome. I'm just saying that's not this case. Because over here, it's part of the beged. It's made out of the material of the beged. It doesn't have a nice finish. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. Oh, if that's the malal, what happens if the tzitzis is not done properly? You're chayiv. Because some of those strands, they are chashuv. Not like those little unwoven edges. Eloma, it's not kosher. You want them to be there. So wearing a beged, hairst, a talis, cotton or gadol, if the tzitzis become possible, but they're on it, I'm not even talking about the fact that you're wearing a beged of dalad convoys without tzitzis. That's a violation of a mitzvah. So say you're carrying on Shabbos. Aval, a talis that mitzuyetzes kol chassan. The Rambam has a good question. You don't have to wear tzitzis at night. Why is that ankle carrying? Mutalotzes boy. Because she'ein hatzitzis hagemura. Now that it's good, you don't view it as a masoi. You view it also as the noy habeged. It's like a hem. It only becomes problematic if it's possible. If that would be the case, because even during the day that I'm argues, because since Shabbos is a mitzvah for which there is kaddish, but at she'ein mitzvahs asay she'ein by kaddish will be doicha Shabbos. What is that Rabbi alluding to? To Mila. Mila takas doicha Shabbos because Mila has a say. Pesach is going to be doicha Shabbos. Say sheish by kaddish, but not tzitzis. The point is that as long as the tzitzis is kol chasa, it's considered minoye habeged and it's not a problem. Halacha chaf aleph lo yetzei hachayit b'Shabbos b'machan tchol b'big day nagar. Now, some people wear because of their profession, they have things added onto their garments. For example, a tailor would walk around during the week with a needle stuck in his garment. And you have a carpenter would walk around with a ruler behind his ear. And a weaver, right, would walk around with wool behind his ear. And a carter with flax around his neck. And a money changer would go around with a dinar in his ear. How great. The bankers would put a dinar in their ears. And at Saba, a dyer would always walk around with samples in his ear. So when you look at his ear, you can see, I can make this color or that color. So they would walk with that. So what's the argument? For them, it's a malbush because they walk with that. You know what? Taka. Midrabanan, you can't do it, but if they went, you're potted. Now you can argue that because it's not the other way. Very good. That's machlokes. If you remember, Rabbi Yehuda paskins you're chayiv. And the irony is, that's the question here in the Rambam. What's the klal? We learned this together. Rabbi Yehuda halachic Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Meir, we're not yored with soif data. So ironically, even though we knew he was smarter, but we couldn't fully understand him. And here the Rambam is paskening like Rabbi Meir, which is gavaldik. Hazov. Now, unlike the pad for a woman, if a man is having this unnatural seminal emissions from his body, so there would be certain type of receptacles that were worn on the male member that would make sure that the outer garment would not become soiled. By the protection for a woman, it's not a problem. Here it is a problem for a man. You need it. And therefore, what's the argument? The argument is you don't need this for it. You just need it for your garments not to get dirty. But the Rambam already passed him, like Rabbi Yehuda. So watch it this up good. Don't go out. What should you do? So again, we just had this before about the kameya part of it. You can wear it. It's called a malbush. It's called a malbush. You're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbos. You're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbos l'shem mitzvah. I know that, but no, it's not a machlekes. Machlekes is at night. We paskin midoiraisa that laila is man tefillin, but it's tefillin is a mitzvah seishas man gerama because it's not zmanoi when there's an ois Shabbos and Yontif, and the Rambam paskin that way also. So the kid said, if you find tefillin in the street, what should you do? Loit sham kedarkon. In other words, you can't leave it on the street. It's a bizayon. You can't carry it. You're carrying. Wear them. Here, there's a big deal to be made. We always spoke. The Rambam always speaks about the head before the hand. When you put them on l'shem mitzvah, what do you put on first? The yad. Here, you're doing it because it's on the ground. So, which one has more kedusha? The shorosh. That's meduya. First, put on the shorosh. Then put on the shoyad. The nichnas. The chotz and the bias. And then what happens if you found many pairs of tefillin? Guys, the key is that your kavana is not l'shem mitzvah, that you're not allowed to do. And do, even if you're going to do this the whole day, you won't have enough time to save all of them. Then what should you do? Since you can't save all of them, you know what's better? Wait there. You know, that's a gavaldik. So what's better? Having some of them lay on the ground the whole Shabbos, but some of them you bring into the house? Don't forget, there's a downside. When I bring it into the house, the ones that I left on the street are left unmashgiached. So here, it's better to stand there the whole time. A guy who's finding you guarding the tefillin, your life will be in danger. Then, now guys, what would be the other solution that normally we would say? Pick them up and transfer them, pachos, medal adamas. But this guy is afraid to do so. It's a lot of tefillin, it's a lot. So then you can cover it. Listen, if you're not afraid of shmad, you're simply afraid of ganovim, then noitel es kulam ka'achas. Then take all of them, because really, midiraisa, that's not called carrying. Midarabanan, were machmir, you might end up taking it more than daladamas. Here, they're lenient. As we learned, when we know that this has kedushas tefillin, how do you know that? When they have straps in it, and when you have the dalid and the yud on the noddings on the tefillin, then you know shemad tefillin. But if you don't have it, so you say mikusharos. Therefore, what's the other possibility? Again, we don't do this now. People wrote it l'kameya. And they dafka didn't want people to write it, to wear it l'shem mitzvah. It wasn't written l'shem mitzvah. It was not written l'shma. So then, ein iskar klahem. Don't do that. Leave it where it is. It's amazing, even though it has Shem Hashem, but it's covered. It's not called a bezayin if there's no mitzvah in it. Halacha chafei. Hamoitz sefer Torah. What are you going to do? You're going to wear it? We're going to see in a moment. So then, yoishem b'mashamroi, and wait there. If there's a danger, again, danger, religious danger, you cannot be found guarding a Sefer Torah, then you can leave it. Now, what happens if it's raining? Look at this, Chadra. You can wrap yourself in the Sefer Torah. But then you have to cover the parchment with your garments. You take off your outer garments, take off your jacket, take off your kapata. Mamish. The nichlas boy. Wow. It's not normally worn. Guys, don't forget that rain is mamish going to ruin a Sefer Torah. Yes, Danny, because walking less than Daled Amos, what's the chashash? That I might end up walking more than Daled Amos. Here, since it's not the darkoi, so you're never going to violate Isur Dairais. Final halacha chavav. Now we're going to go out of Shabbos. A chayat should already not go with his needle in his hand. The lavlar, the scribe, should not go with the quill in his hand out of Shabbos, because since he goes around with it the whole week, Shema Yishkach Beyoitzi. And based on this Shema Yishkach, there's a halacha. Chayiv Adam Lamashmish Bebigdo Yerev Shabbos and Chashecha. Shema Yeh Sham Davar Shechuach Ve'Yisrael Shabbos. You know, living in a city with an Eruv, for people who use the Eruv, that's something that they forget a lot. Even people that remember when they go to another place not to carry, but this, remember as a kid, always check your garments before Shabbos. Make sure there's nothing in your pocket. You might end up wearing it. People wore tefillin the whole time. Here, we're not afraid you're gonna keep wearing it, because since you are constantly touching your tefillin, you're gonna remember you're wearing your tefillin. And on Shabbos, and you see that yeshlon b'roishoy. So here's another nuance: for people not to notice that you're wearing tefillin. Now, guys, final pedic today. We have 10 minutes. At least there's only 14 halachas. This entire chapter is speaking about shvisas behemtoi, shvisas amoy, shvisas avdoi va'amosa. The main bulk of the chapter is shvisas behemtoi. So there's no obligation for my kalim to be in a state of restfulness, but my animals cannot do a malacha. And then together with that, I cannot be machamer acher behemtoi, as we'll see in a moment. Halacha out. Asur lohoitzi masal behemah b'Shabbos. I'm not allowed to transfer an item, yakir freilach, on an animal on Shabbos. We're going to go quick. And why? So guys, remember this. You're going to say, it says in the 10 Commandments. Yeah, I know it says in the 10 Commandments. But the Rambam is beginning first with the pasuk in Mishpatim. Because it's a mitzvah saseh, and it's taka mitzvah loy saseh. But any lav, that if at times you're chayiv skila, that means if I'm plowing with my animal, I can't plow on my own. I'm going to be chayiv skila. That's called a lav shenita and lahazoras misas bezdin. Even if I'm putting a pekel on my animal and the animal is doing the whole hoitzah, I won't get any punishment. This is not a law for which there's any other punishment than the few times that I'll get skilled. So we begin with a mitzvah saseh. And by the way, there's no punishment for a mitzvah saseh. So this din of asur lohoitzi masal behem b'Shabbos shenemar, the positive, it says in Mishpatim l'man yonuach shoyrecha v'chamoirecha, and that means echad shoyr ve'echad chamoir ve'echad kol behem v'chai v'oif. I violated the mitzvah saseh. I'm not going to be chayv malkes. And again, we're going to get to the law in a moment. And therefore, guys, let me kite you. If a person directs his animal while it's carrying a burden, you're not doing the daladamas b'rishos, but your animal is. Because of you violating a mitzvah saseh, guys, what's the word? Pater. What does pater mean over here? Not pater biblically, only asim midrabanan. Pater, you're chayiv doiraisa. You're not going to be punished. You're exempt from punishment. Now, the Rambam says, Allah Beis, 1 second. I get it that for an asay, you don't get a punishment for an asay. But ah, so that's so. The Rambam says that also includes not only mechamer, that includes shelo yachrish b'v'chayitz v'charish. Charish is an act that a person needs to do together in partnership with the behema. Since if I'm chaydish with my behema, I'm chayiv skila. So any other malacha that I'm doing with an animal, even if it's only the animal, you're not going to get punished for that love. Okay, halacha yibam. Asur Yisrael. Therefore, a yid may not borrow. Lend. You cannot lend out. You cannot even rent. Now, guys, when I rent you my house, whose house is it? It depends for what. For Hilchas Pesach, for Bedikas Chametz, it's the renters. For Mezuzah, Choyves Hadar. Not for this. If I own the animal, let's rent the behema. Even though you're paying for rent, that animal is not allowed to do malach on Shabbos. So therefore, it's usher for a yid to lend out or to rent his animal. Now, it depends what animal. Because if my animal is a horse, people ordinarily would use a horse for what? For riding. Riding that I'm a paskin chai noisatz atzma. It's not a biblical violation. But animals that are commonly used to do malacha, that cannot be done. And even though it's rented out, that's a big thing. Now, let's go to step number 2. That's the Issa Doiraisa. Therefore, we make a gzeira. I may not even sell a behema gasal l'nachri. Wow, that means these are certain businesses that you can only do with Yidden. Shema Yashul or Yaskid. Because if you can sell, you might end up lending or renting. Now, the Imachar, you know how strong the Chazal was? People laughed at this because he says that's such a fetch. I'm not going to lend it. I'm not going to rent it. I'm just selling it. I need the money. If you sold it, buy it back, even if the guy is charging you 10 times the price. And buy it back. You have to buy it back. And even if the shvura, you know what shvura means? He's not going to be doing a malacha on it. He's not doing it. He cannot. It's broken. Imagine. But you can sell it through a broker. Oh, here we go. There we start. You're living in Eretz Yisrael. What are you going to do with it? Get a broker, because you're the owner. You're not selling it directly. And the key is, no one would lend and rent through a broker. Then it's only a gzeira shema, yashil shema. You're going to rent. Do it, but often that it's never done that way. But you can sell a horse. You can, guys, we're not saying you can lend a horse, but you can sell a horse, because selling is only gzeira. A horse, to begin with, is only used primarily for riding people. That's called gzeira l'gzeira. So you don't make gzeira l'gzeira. It's amazing. A sarsur, but selling it to a yid, or sell it to the guy, you can't do.
Over to a Jew that might use it on
Yeah. As long as they shecht it in front of you. You know, certain animals underwent certain steps in order for it to be prime for shchita. Like an ox. You would stuff up the ox. When you would stuff it up, like when you eat too much cholent, you're not going to be a schlepper. You can't move. So even if the shoy was ungestoppt, you don't say, for sure he's going to shecht it. No, because maybe he'll buy it, even though he's telling you he's going to shecht it. He's going to wait for the animal intermittent fasting. Then it would lose the cholent by the belly, and then he's going to work with it. Halachei. What about it? Depends in a minute. See, people were charedi. No matter what, only through a sarsur. It got dark. Guys, listen to this. You don't have a guy with whom to give your wallet, but you have an animal. Guys, look at this chap. What did we learn? What's called a hanacha? Not only dalad, but stationary. So maniach kisai, you can put your wallet on the back of the animal while the animal is walking. And when you notice the animal is about to stop, you pick it up. For it not to stop when it's on it. In other words, to do it in a way. Now there's another issue here, guys. This addresses the carrying. But one second, what about being machamer? Machamer means I cannot direct the animal. And a chanami, the Rambam says. But for us, when the wallet is on the back of the animal, you can't direct it. And not directing it doesn't only mean you can't schlep that string. You can't even direct it with your voice. Now, the first solution is so great. It sounds like you're not doing anything. Now, guys, I know some animals, if you're not going to direct them, you're not going to gain anything, because the animal is going to go who knows where. But some animals, like your dog, they're going to go home. They don't need your direction. So, why don't we say this? See, it's a great solution. If you have a kiss in your pocket, put it on the back of the animal when the animal is moving. You think you didn't violate a Shabbos. If there's a behemoth or a goy, better to give it to a goy. You know why? Because you might end up directing it. Imagine if your dog with your wallet, with your credit cards, decided to go to someone else. You'll freak out. So which one should you pick? Because they're yid. If you have to choose between a chedesh and a shoita, and you don't have an animal, give it to the shoita, who's the least mechuyev. You understand? Shoita v'katan, you give it to the shoita. Chedesh v'katan, they're equal. Not a behema, not a goy, not echad nikol elu. Then again, normally we don't tell you carry pachas midalit, but we also learned that adam bohul al mamoinei. If you're going to tell him you can't do anything, he's going to break Shabbos. So here the chachamim said, okay, carry it pachas. You can argue if it's a mitzvah, you didn't work for it. If you didn't pick up the mitzvah yet, then better to wait there. And if you can't wait until the end of Shabbos, Chazal knew human psychology. and they felt it's better to tell the Yid, pick it up and walk pachos, because if they'll tell you something more than that, you'll have to give up the mitzvah. God forbid, you won't be omed ben asay. Halacha ches. Mutar limshechas abehema b'mesek b'reson shelo lo shus rabim. Animals have reins. Animals have bridles. The Rambam says that's not called machamer. You can lead it by that. Walking your dog. In other words, that's the whole Mishnah. That called balei sheir, yoitz nechnases v'shir v'yoitzes v'shir. That's the famous story with the Alter Rebbe. But for any type of, what's it called in English? No, the leash. The type of leash that's normally worn by that animal, you're allowed to walk, you're allowed to hold on to that. Like a sheir l'sus, an afsul l'gamol, a chatom l'naka, and a sugar, which was it was a muzzle for a dog. That is, it's not. In other words, what's the issue here? The issue here is, why is that not called a masoy? It's not called a masoy. Any leash that's on the animal, not as a burden, but it's there be'ikr to control the animal's movements, it's not called a masoy. Now, there are other details when it comes to a leash. The Rambam is going to write it soon. That means if I have a leash with the dog, even though there's no eruv and you can walk with it, that no part of the leash is within a tefach of the floor. And when I have it in my hand, what's protruding from the other side is not more than a tefach, because then that's unnecessary. But as long as I'm holding on to the edge, today you have these American leashes, basically with the thing like the roller, when you go fishing. So you don't have a tefach sticking out, as long as it doesn't get too close to the floor, even if there's no eruv, it's not called carrying, not for you, not to the behem. But if you took it out with the bridle, that's not sufficient, because that animal needs a stronger one, like you put a chevel in the mouth of a horse or a message, it's not needed. Overkill. It's an overkill. You don't need to have such a big rope. You're putting a cat, you're putting on the leash of a dog, you put it on a cat, it's too much. That's called a masoi. You know what it means, guys? You're chayiv. Shekol shemira mu'ula. Listen to this. Protection. If you're overly protected, it's a masui, as it is under protection. What about camels? You have many camels together. So now that we established the proper rope that you schlepp them by is okay, it's not called a masui. What happens if you have 10 camels? So the halach yelich was you would tie camel 10 to camel 9, camel 9 to camel 8, and you would only hold the front one. That you're not allowed to do. Even if they, not because of keshet, even if they were tied before Shabbos, you're not allowed to take them out on Shabbos. You know why? Because that's the way you took them to the marketplace. It's a marasayin issue. What do? Have each strap in your hand separately, all 10 of them. When can you carry it? Like we just explained what that means. And everything from the animal until your hand should be above a tefach of the ground. If not human, the person is carrying. Halacha, guys, I want to just add one thing just quickly, that animals are muktzah. We're going to get to muktzah soon. So all of this is good if you're not directly moving the animal. Now, why can't you carry them, or if they're bind one to the other? It looks like you're taking them to the market to sell them, or you're taking them to do sports with them. Don't put a bell around the neck of an animal, even if the clapper is plugged, so there's no issue of Hashmas coil. Because when people would sell the animals to make the animal look more attractive, they would put on these bells. So anything that gives the appearance you're taking it for the purpose of selling it is also midrabanan. Halacha 10, like you say, an animal may not go with a bell attached to its covering. Right? Today you can say clothing. Today they make clothing for animals. Nor with the seal attached to his neck, nor with the seal attached to his garment, or to its coverings, nor with shoes. Animals have shoes. Guys, come to LA, you'll be shocked. They go with ties. Sulam was that sometimes they didn't want for the animal to be able to look back. Why would animals look back? Sometimes they had a wound. And sometimes when they would try to heal the wound, like when we scratch a scab, they would constantly wound it. So they had these cones. You can't do that. Guys, you should remember the names. Mardas is a cloth saddle. What's the mile of a cloth saddle? That it warms up the animal. Big difference. A saddle that's made out of leather, It's not for the animal that's more problematic. This theoretically is not problematic. You know why? Because it's like a garment for the animal. But there's another issue that normally they were put on by making a proper knot, and that knot was a Maisa Uman. So here, the Rambam is saying, of Shabbos. But if it was the knot was done before Shabbos, it's considered like a ksus. If there's a certain patch that they used to attach only to the hump or only to its tail, and they would attach it for superstitious reasons, that's called carrying. But if it was bound to both its tail and its hump, that's considered the way they would cover the animal. That's considered like a malbush on the animal. As we learned in the past chapter, here also something that's considered the malbush of the animal is not called carrying. If one of the front legs or back legs were tied up, it was tied up because they didn't want the animals to run away. So it cannot walk properly. That in itself is problematic. Chickens may not go out with cords or other straps that are on their feet. Rams may not go out with small wagons. They would have fat tails, and their tails would get wounded when it schleps on the ground. So they would have these little wagons. So that's already called carrying. You have female lambs cannot go out with chips of woods that are placed on their nostrils. Why would they place them in the nostrils? Because sometimes they would have worms stuck in their heads, and the way you would get rid of it is that you would put you put something up the nostril, you will make them sneeze. So that's very nice, but that's called carrying. The oil cotton, they would have already little yokes placed on little behemoth. They should get used to later plowing. That's called a masui. You cannot have an animal going out with a muzzle placed in its mouth in order for it not to bite or not to eat. All of these things are considered carrying. Because they don't want for little shiratzim to go and suckle from the animal. Whether you put that type of a strand between the horns for beauty or for a restraint, that's not considered the norm, and therefore it's carrying. But if you have a goat and you pierced it, and then in between the piercing, you would put the rope tied in between the horns, that's good. That's normal. But if you put that rope on the beard, you can lead the animal by the beard. That's awesome. You know why? Not because it's awesome per se, because it might get torn off. You're gonna fight. See, if you put it between the horns, you're gonna fight. It's not gonna. The horns won't come off. The beard can be ripped off, and then you might end up carrying it. Males. There was a certain type of strap that they tied against the male member in order for the male not to be active. That you're allowed to do. You are allowed to put the hard piece of leather over their hearts. So when wolves would attack them, they would try to rip out the hearts. That would be their protection. And they are allowed to walk out. Anything that's any type of embroidered cloth, like for people, that's done to make them beautiful, not for selling. That's okay. Female. So sometimes they would tie the tail. They would tie the tail up in order for males to mount them, or sometimes when they didn't want them to be mounted, they would tie it down. That's not a problem. That's not a problem. The yoitzes milupafos b'matlanios, they can go out covered with a cloth in order for their wool on their bodies to remain clean. The ha'izim and goats are allowed to go out with vidadeim keshuros kedei sheyivash mehem acholov. Avalim kasharam kedei shelo acholov achiach le'erev. That already lo yetzu. Halach yud gimel ain't kamod yetzu b'ukav. Guys, a saddle. We learned. There is the mardas, it's warm. But a normal saddle, it's only for a man to go on it. That you can't do. Even though it's bound. They would put on a tail of a fox on a horse. You know for what? For ayin hara. Can't do that. That was done l'noy. Just like a person can wear a wounding, a dressing for a wound, so can the animal. They can go with plates. An animal can go like a person with a cast. And if there was a shilya that's hanging out of the animal, that's okay. And also, not on the market, marasayan, you're going to sell it. Yes. Now, what about, we said about kesher. I'm not going to violate making a kesher, but my animal is cold, so I want to use the cloth saddle for warmth. Yes, if the animal is in the chutzner. And what's the worst case scenario? It's going to fall off. I'm in my chutzner. Kalasta b'fiyah b'Shabbos, the animals used to have these feeding bags. That is something that you can't hang around, even in the yard. You know why? Because your animal might walk outside the yard. Then they're carrying on Shabbos. Final halacha yudalid. All of the above also goes to your male or female servant. Kishem she'adam mitzuv al shvisas behemte b'Shabbos kach hu mitzuv al shvisas avdei v'amoisi. This is an evet knani, a shivcha knanis. V'afal pi shehem b'nei das. So you can argue, why am I chayiv? Why am I chayiv? They're chayiv. Well, das atzmanoisim. Nevertheless, I'm obligated l'shamram l'manan masiyas malach b'Shabbos shenemar in the 10 Commandments. In Pashas Mishpatim, the positive commandment. L'man yonuach shorcha v'chamor chavira v'shben ha'masech ha'ageh. Eved v'amosh an musuvan al shvisasan. Who are they? These are servants that they had a bris milah and they went to the mikvah l'shem avdus, and therefore they are obligated to keep all of the mitzvahs. However, says the Rambam, abadam shalim lo yikavlu. What did we learn before? If they're not makabel sheva mitzvahs b'nei noyach, the Rambam had very harsh words. They were makabel sheva mitzvahs, but they were not mal v'toivel. Then they are like a ger toishav, and they're allowed to do malach on Shabbos, even b'feresya. Hence, like a yid b'choil. Now, the Rambam writes again, we had this above, that you're not makabel a ger toishav, el b'zman shayir b'noy. Hoyel the ger toishav oisim malach l'atzmi b'Shabbos, and the ger tzedek is like a yid. So kaich the pasuk in Mishpatim where it says the nafish bein amos chava hager. Who are we talking about? Answers the Rambam. That goes to a ger toishav who is not mechuyev to keep Shabbos, but he happens to be your employee. Sholekito yischide shal Yisrael. Kamay ben Amosai. That here the din is sholayasem alach Yisrael Rabbi. He cannot work for his Rebbe on Shabbos. Abal atzmei oisem. Vafilo hayager. Vafilo hayager avdoi. If it's an Eved that was not mal v'toivel shuki, then it is oisel atzmei mazel tov. Wow, guys, tomorrow's the last.